The void between stars is not empty, it only pretends to be. For 211 days, the ISV Constellation had been pretending along with it. No engine burn, no active scan, no signal of any kind leaking into the dark. Just a hole in space designed to drink radar and swallow light, sitting perfectly still while 3 alien fleets moved around it like water around a stone they could not see. 11,000 kilometers from the mouth of the Araven Corridor, the ship hung in silence. Inside, Captain Ara Voss stood on the bridge and made herself a cup of water. The ritual had become muscle memory. Heat the water, pour it slowly. Hold the cup with both hands. Feel the warmth. The coffee rations had run out on day 160-51 days ago. She had stopped counting the days without caffeine and started counting the days until the mission ended. She did not know when that would be. She only knew it would be soon. The bridge was dark except for the pale glow of passive sensors. Blue-green light painted the faces of her crew in soft relief. They moved quietly, spoke in short sentences, breathed like people who had forgotten how to make noise. 211 days of discipline had turned silence into a second language. Lieutenant Commander Silas Dane sat at the weapons console, humming something old and bluesy under his breath. The sound was barely audible, more vibration than music. Nobody told him to stop. Out here, a quiet hum was the closest thing to music anyone was going to get. Dr. Zara Nakamura occupied the navigation station, her eyes fixed on charts that existed only in her mind. She had been tracking the Dravathi fleet's patrol routes for 6 weeks. She could predict their movements better than their own commanders could. Every vector, every timing window, every gravitational shortcut, she knew them all. Alara watched her crew and felt something close to pride. They had been out here long enough that silence had stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like strength. Every person on this ship understood what the mission was. Watch, record, do not be seen, do not be heard. Wait. Alara set down her cup and pulled up the daily review, a routine she had performed every morning for 211 days. Status of the hull, status of the passive sensor array, status of the data banks, status of the crew, all green, all green. 94 terabytes of recorded alien communication and fleet movement, all fine. She noted that today was day 211. She made a mental calculation. 7 months. They had been out here for 7 months, watching 3 civilizations circle each other like animals deciding who moves first. The Araven Corridor was not beautiful. It was a dense transit lane between star systems rich with navigable paths and gravitational shortcuts that cut weeks off any long-distance freight or military run. Whoever held it held leverage over half the sector. All 3 factions knew this. All 3 factions wanted it. None of them were willing to fire the first shot because none of them were sure they could survive what came after. So, instead, they postured. They moved ships. They sent encrypted messages that the Constellation caught and stored like pressed flowers in a book no one else would ever read, until now. Alara finished her review and pulled up the long-range feed. Fleet Commander Drex Van of the Dravathi was broadcasting again. She had come to recognize his voice over the months. Flat, clipped. The kind of tone that was trained to sound like authority, even when hiding uncertainty. He was addressing his fleet on what he clearly believed was a secure channel. He was wrong about the secure part. Alara listened as Drex made his declaration. The corridor was now under Dravathi operational control. All non-Dravathi vessels were advised to withdraw within 48 hours. He finished by stating with the confidence of a man who had checked twice that no foreign military vessels were present in the corridor. The area was clean. The area was clear. The area was not clear. The Constellation sat 11,000 kilometers from the edge of Drex's declared perimeter and said nothing. Zara, without looking up from her charts, spoke quietly. "He really believes that." "He ran good scans," Silas said from across the bridge. "Best I've seen from a Dravathi setup, just not good enough." Ilara said nothing for a moment. She set down her cup. She looked at the databanks. 94 terabytes of conversations, fleet positions, broken treaties, private deals made in the dark between people who thought nobody was listening. Then she looked at the corridor feed. Drex's ships were moving into formation. The Thavin were watching. The Velcarth had gone even quieter than before. She thought about the 6 other corridors deeper in the sector. She thought about what happened when 3 powers went to war in a tight transit lane and how fast it spread. She thought about the brief that had put the Constellation out here in the first place. 1 ship. Quiet. Watch, learn, wait for the right moment. Day 211. This was the right moment. She placed her cup down on the console without a sound and spoke 4 words that would change the galaxy. "Prepare to decloak." Nobody cheered. Nobody made a speech. Silas cracked his knuckles once. Zara pulled up a new set of charts she had already prepared. The Constellation, 211 days invisible, began to wake up. 7 months earlier. The briefing room at Naval Space Command in San Diego had windows that looked out over the Pacific. Ilara remembered thinking how strange it was to plan a mission in deep space while watching waves break against the shore. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, his fingers moving across a holographic display that showed the Araven Corridor in 3 dimensions. Red, blue, and green markers represented the 3 factions converging on the same strategic choke point. 300 years, Rodriguez said. That's how long the Araven Corridor has been a trade route. In that time, it has changed hands 14 times. Every time it changes hands, the surrounding sector pays for it in ships and lives and broken economies. He zoomed in on the current positioning. Dravathi destroyers holding the upper mouth. Thavin response fleets repositioning nervously. Velcarth merchant vessels playing both sides. "They're building toward number 15, Rodriguez continued. "We estimate 4 to 6 months before someone fires the first shot. When that happens, the conflict will spread to at least 6 neighboring systems. Conservative casualty estimates are in the millions." Ilara studied the display. She had spent the previous 3 weeks reviewing intelligence reports on all 3 factions. The Dravathi were a military-industrial empire, authoritarian and expansion-focused. The Thavin Confederation was a democratic alliance of 7 worlds, diplomatic but increasingly nervous. The Velcarth Collective was a merchant oligarchy that believed every problem had a price. "Our objective," Rodriguez said, looking directly at Ilara, "is to prevent that war before it starts." "With 1 ship," Ilara said. Not a question, a confirmation. "With 1 ship," Rodriguez agreed. "The Constellation. Full stealth configuration. You'll insert into the corridor region and go dark. Total communications blackout. Your mission is to observe and record everything. Fleet movements, encrypted communications, private channels, diplomatic back channels, everything." "How long?" Ilara asked. "As long as it takes. You'll know the right moment when you see it." Ilara looked at the 3 factions on the display circling each other like sharks. "And when I see it, you decloak. You show them what you've collected, and you convince them that going to war would be the worst mistake they could possibly make." The room was quiet for a moment. Someone shifted in their seat. "We're not sending you to start a war, Captain," Rodriguez said. "We're sending you to prevent one." Ilara nodded slowly. She thought about the physics of it, the patience required, the discipline. Most military operations were measured in days or weeks. This one would be measured in months, maybe longer. "I'll need a specific crew," she said. Rodriguez smiled. "I thought you might." Lieutenant Commander Silas Dane had been Ilara's weapons officer for 5 years. When she told him about the mission, he listened without interrupting, then asked one question. "How long in the dark?" "Months, maybe half a year." He nodded. "You need someone who can target 3 fleets simultaneously without flinching. I'm in." Dr. Zara Nakamura had a PhD in astrophysics and could predict fleet movements with the precision of someone reading music from a score. When Ilara explained the mission parameters, Zara's response was immediate. "I can predict their movements better than their own navigators. When do we leave?" 4 weeks later, the constellation departed Earth orbit. Ilara watched the planet shrink behind them and thought about what they were about to do. Disappear into the void for months. Watch civilizations prepare for war. Wait for the exact right moment to reveal themselves. It was the kind of mission that required absolute faith in the process. Faith that patience would matter more than firepower. Faith that information would prove more powerful than intimidation. Ilara had that faith. She had spent 15 years in naval intelligence before taking command. She knew how wars started. Most of them began because someone made a decision based on incomplete information. Someone assumed they knew what their opponent was thinking. Someone believed they could act in secret. The Constellation's mission was to remove those assumptions, to prove that secrets had witnesses, to show that someone was always watching. The void between stars is not empty. They were going to prove it. Day 1. The insertion was perfect. Zara plotted a course through a debris field that gave them cover while they powered down all active systems. The Constellation's stealth plating was designed to absorb radar and scatter sensor returns. Once they went dark, they became a ghost. Ilara gave the order at 0600 hours. "From this moment, we are ghosts." The ship's reactor dropped to minimal output. Life support shifted to whisper mode. Communication arrays went silent. Every system that could emit a detectable signal was shut down or reconfigured. The crew moved through the ship like shadows, speaking in hushed tones, walking with careful steps. The silence was not oppressive. It was purposeful. They had work to do. Day 47. The first close call came on day 47. A Dravathi patrol ship passed 800 meters from their position. Ilara watched the sensor feed as the vessel moved through their space-active scanners, sweeping the area in methodical patterns. The bridge was absolutely silent. Every crew member froze. Silas's hand hovered over the weapons console, ready to arm systems if they were detected. Zara's eyes tracked the patrol ship's trajectory, calculating whether they needed to move. 40 minutes. That was how long the patrol ship stayed in their immediate vicinity. 40 minutes of holding breath and watching sensors, and waiting to see if 7 weeks of silence would be shattered by a single detection. The patrol ship moved on, oblivious. When it was gone, Ilara allowed herself one deep breath. Then she returned to her station and continued the mission. Day 89. By day 89, the routine was established. The crew had adapted to life in silence. They spoke in short sentences. They moved with economy. They had learned to live inside the quiet. Silas ran targeting diagnostics every morning, humming old blues songs while his fingers moved across the console. The diagnostics did not need to be run that often. He ran them anyway. It gave his hands something to do. Zara sat at navigation and memorized patrol patterns. She knew the Dravathi fleet's routes better than their own officers did. She could predict when a ship would appear before it showed up on sensors. The patterns were mathematical, predictable, almost beautiful in their consistency. Ilara watched her crew and felt the mission settling into its rhythm. This was not the kind of work that rewarded impatience. This was the kind of work that required absolute commitment to the process. Watch, record, wait. They were becoming very good at waiting. Day 124. The psychological strain began to show around day 124. The crew was speaking in even shorter sentences. Laughter had disappeared weeks ago. Silas had stopped humming. The silence was total. Ilara noticed and instituted a new protocol, quiet hour. 1 hour each day in the mess hall, where the crew could whisper, freely speak to each other without the weight of operational security pressing down on them. It helped. Not much, but enough. They continued. Day 160. The coffee ran out on day 160. Ilara had been rationing it carefully, making it last as long as possible. But mathematics was mathematics. They had been out here longer than anyone had predicted. The supplies were finite. She made the last cup and shared it with her senior staff. 3 small sips each. Then it was gone. The next morning she made herself a cup of hot water and drank it the same way she had drunk coffee. The ritual mattered more than the substance. Morale held. The mission continued. Day 200. By day 200, they had collected 94 terabytes of data. Fleet movements, encrypted communications, maintenance records, private channels. The Dravathi were positioning for occupation. Their private channels revealed uncertainty masked by bravado. Fleet Commander Drex was under pressure from his superiors to deliver a victory. He needed the corridor to prove his worth. The Thavin were nervous. Their democratic processes meant every decision was debated, analyzed, second-guessed. They wanted peaceful access to the corridor, but were preparing for defensive war. The Velcarth were playing both sides. Chancellor Thyros sent private messages to Dravathi contacts while publicly supporting Thavin neutrality. He believed in leverage. He believed the war would make him rich. All 3 factions were moving toward the same cliff. None of them could see it, but Ilara could. She had been watching for 200 days. She knew what was coming. The question was when to act. Day 188. 11,000 kilometers away on the Dravathi flagship, Ensign Kyle Vex was running his 47th full corridor scan. He had been a sensor officer for 4 years. He had never seen a contact appear from nothing. Ships moved, ships decelerated, ships came through jump points with the distinct signature of folded space snapping back into place. That was how things worked. That was the physics of it. But something felt wrong. Kyle stared at his returns. The corridor was showing clean. Empty. No contacts. Too clean. Too empty. Space was never that empty. There was always debris. Always background radiation. Always something creating noise in the sensors. This was too perfect. Kyle ran a probability analysis. He asked himself a question: what would it take to hide a ship in this corridor? The answer came back immediately. Specific insertion vector. Arrival before the upgraded sensor net was deployed. Advanced stealth technology. And most importantly, arrival at least 6 to 7 months ago, before the crisis started. Kale felt something cold settle in his stomach. He ran the numbers again. The mathematics was clear. If someone wanted to hide in this corridor, if someone wanted to watch without being seen, they would have needed to arrive months ago. They would be here now. He wrote a detailed report. He included all of his calculations. He submitted it to his commanding officer with a single recommendation: conduct intensive deep field scan of the corridor region. The response came back 3 hours later. Sensor ghosts. Space is full of them. Dismissed. Kale stared at the dismissal for a long time. Then he opened his personal log and wrote one sentence. Commander Drex is wrong. I know he is wrong. Mathematics does not lie. He filed the log and returned to his scans. But the feeling stayed with him. The certainty that something was out there watching, waiting. He kept scanning, kept calculating, kept being proven wrong by sensors that showed nothing, until the day they would show everything. The Araven Corridor. The corridor itself was a testament to bad geography and worse politics. 300 years ago, explorers had mapped the gravitational shortcuts that made the Araven region a natural highway between star systems. Trade followed the maps. Settlements followed the trade. Wars followed the settlements. 14 times in 3 centuries, the corridor had changed hands. Each transfer of power was purchased in blood and measured in economic collapse. The surrounding sector had learned to dread the words Araven crisis, because they always meant the same thing: war, destruction, years of rebuilding. And now number 15. The Dravathi Empire wanted military control, strategic positioning, a victory to justify their expansion philosophy. The Thavin Confederation wanted economic access, free trade, security through cooperation. The Velcarth Collective wanted monopoly, control the corridor, control the commerce, control the profit. 3 civilizations, 1 corridor, 0 willingness to compromise. The mathematics of the conflict were simple. Within 48 hours, someone would fire the first shot. Within a week, the corridor would be a war zone. Within a month, the conflict would spread to 6 neighboring systems. Within a year, millions would be dead, and the sector's economy would be in ruins. Every intelligence agency in the galaxy could see it coming. The numbers were clear. Only one organization decided to do something about it before the shooting started. The United States Naval Space Command deployed 1 ship, 1 crew, 1 mission: prevent war through perfect information. Day 2. 111. The decision. Ilara woke at 0500 hours, the same time she had woken every day for 7 months. She reviewed the overnight sensor logs. The Dravathi had moved 2 more destroyer-class ships into the upper mouth of the corridor. The Thavin response fleet had repositioned 3 times in 12 hours. The Velcarth had gone quiet. At 0530, Ilara intercepted Fleet Commander Drex's scheduled broadcast. She knew it was coming. They had been monitoring his communications planning for 3 days. At 700 hours, Drex would make a public announcement. He would declare the Araven Corridor under Dravathi operational control. He would demand all non-Dravathi vessels withdraw within 48 hours. This was the trigger, the moment when posturing became action, when political tension became military crisis. Ilara made herself a cup of water. She held it with both hands. She felt the warmth. She ran the analysis one more time. All factors aligned. The 3 factions were committed. War was imminent. The Constellation had complete intelligence. The timing was perfect. She finished her water and called her senior staff to the bridge. At 0600 hours, Lieutenant Commander Silas Dane and Dr. Zara Nakamura stood before her captain. Ilara spoke quietly. "We're decloaking at 0720 hours, 20 minutes after Drex's announcement." Silas cracked his knuckles once. 211 days of silence. This better be good. Zara had already pulled up 17 exit vectors. One of them passed close enough to a Velcarth listening post to collect 3 more months of signals data on the way home. She kept that route to herself for now. "Timing?" Silas asked. "We let him declare victory," Ilara said. "Then we prove him wrong." The logic was perfect. Let Drex commit publicly. Let him state with absolute confidence that the corridor was clear, then appear. The psychological impact would be devastating. At 700 hours, the crew sat at their stations and listened as Fleet Commander Drex Van broadcast to 3 fleets. His voice was exactly as Ilara had come to know it, flat, clipped, certain. The Araven Corridor is now under Dravathi operational control. All non-Dravathi vessels are advised to withdraw within 48 hours. This region has been thoroughly scanned and verified. The area is clean. The area is clear. The area is secure. Ilara looked at her crew. The area, she said quietly, is not clear. At 07:15 hours, she gave the preparation order. Silas brought weapon systems online. Zara confirmed escape routes. The ship's reactor began powering up for the first time in 211 days. At 07:20 hours, Captain Ara Voss stood on the bridge of the ISV Constellation and gave the command that would change everything. Retract stealth plating. Light us up. Let them see us. The constellation invisible for 7 months began to appear. 11,000 kilometers away, Ensign Kyle Vex was running a routine scan when his console lit up like a warning beacon. Contact. Between one sensor pulse and the next, something appeared that should not exist. A ship. Warship class. Configuration unknown. Position 11,000 kilometers from the corridor mouth. Kyle stared at his screen. His hands moved without being told, running a secondary scan. The contact remained. Solid. Real. Impossible. Contact, he said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. The scan room went quiet in the wrong way. Not the calm quiet of nothing happening, the tense quiet of everyone suddenly paying attention. Senior Officer Draven crossed the room and looked over Kale's shoulder at the screen. "How long has that been there?" Draven asked. "It wasn't on the last sweep," Kale said. "I know it wasn't on the last sweep. How long?" Kyle had no answer. That was the answer. Fleet Commander Drex arrived 40 seconds later. He saw the screen. He went very still. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies." Before he could speak, the human ship opened the channel first. The voice was female, calm, clear, not aggressive, not apologetic, just present. "This is Captain Ara Voss of the ISV Constellation. We are a registered vessel operating under Human Exploratory Charter. We have been present in the Araven Corridor region for the past 211 days. We are not here to engage anyone. We would like to talk." Silence. Absolute silence across 3 fleets. 211 days. Kyle pulled up the sensor history. 211 days of sweeps. 47 full corridor scans. The ship had been there the entire time, watching, recording, waiting, and they had never known. The void between stars is not empty. It only pretends to be. The ISV Constellation had just stopped pretending. The transmission reached the Thavin Council chambers 12 light minutes after Captain Ara Voss spoke those words. 12 minutes for electromagnetic waves to cross the void and carry news that would reshape the political landscape of 6 star systems. Ambassador Theron Kale was in the middle of a formal session on agricultural subsidies when the communications aide entered the chamber. A breach of protocol so severe that Theron knew immediately something had changed. The aide's face was pale, not frightened, shocked. "Senior members need to see this," the aide said. "Now." Theron followed without question. The display screen showed a vessel that should not exist. The scan data showed a contact that had appeared between sensor pulses. The Hale transcript showed words that made Theron's hearts beat faster. 211 days. "What is a USS designation?" Theron asked. The aide's fingers moved across the interface, pulling up archived records. "Human Vessel Prefix Ambassador. United Spaceship. The configuration matches old Explorer-class hull geometry." Theron looked at the image on the screen. The ship was covered in stealth plating that seemed to drink light. The sensor profile was minimal. The positioning was perfect, close enough to observe everything, far enough to remain undetected. "What do the records say about Explorer-class vessels?" Theron asked. The aide read from the database. "Lightly armed survey vessels, scientific exploration and cultural observation missions. Minimal military capability." Theron stared at the warship on the screen, at the stealth technology that had kept it invisible for 7 months, at the strategic positioning that put it in perfect observation range of 3 fleets. "Those records," Theron said slowly, "were written by humans. For humans. They wanted us to underestimate them." The aide said nothing. "Update the records," Theron said. "And get me the human diplomatic office immediately." Chancellor Thyrus Vex received the alert 8 light minutes from the corridor. His luxury vessel was positioned at the edge of the conflict zone, close enough to monitor developments, far enough to claim neutrality. The message was brief. Unknown contact, human vessel. 211 days of observation. Thyros read the words 3 times. His specialty was leverage, information as currency. He had built his career on knowing things other people did not know, on collecting secrets and trading them for power. 211 days of intelligence, on everyone, including him. Thyros thought about what he had said on channels he believed were secure. Private deals with Dravathi contacts while publicly supporting Thavin interests. Messages to both sides of the conflict, playing them against each other. Positioning Velcarth merchants to profit regardless of who won. Communications he had assumed were private. Conversations he had believed were secret. If the humans had been listening for 7 months, they had heard everything. Every deal, every lie, every manipulation. Thyros felt something he rarely experienced. Fear. Not fear of humans specifically. Fear of exposure. Fear that the leverage he had carefully constructed was about to be turned against him. "Get me complete records on human signals intelligence capabilities," he said to his aide. The aide searched the databases and returned with empty hands. "Sir, those records do not exist. Humans do not share that information with other species." "Exactly," Thyros said. "Which means we have been underestimating them." He looked at the image of the constellation on his display. A ship that had sat invisible for 7 months, watching, recording, collecting every secret 3 civilizations had tried to hide. The question was not what the humans knew. The question was what they planned to do with it. On the bridge of the constellation, Captain Ara Voss waited for responses to her hail. She stood with her hands behind her back, her posture relaxed, her expression calm. Lieutenant Commander Silas Dane watched the communication feeds, monitoring 3 fleets simultaneously processing the impossible information that a human ship had been present for 211 days. Dr. Zara Nakamura tracked fleet repositioning. The Dravathi were holding position uncertain. The Thavin were broadcasting emergency signals to their command structure. The Velcarth had gone completely silent. "They're processing," Ilara said quietly. "Give them time." Silas nodded, but his fingers moved across his console, preparing the next phase of the operation. Ilara caught his eye and nodded once. Silas opened a secondary communication channel, not a hail, not a message, a data transmission. 94 terabytes of information began broadcasting to every active receiver in range. All 3 factions, every neutral relay buoy, every independent trade council monitoring the corridor. The data packet contained everything the constellation had collected over 211 days. Fleet movements, encrypted communications, maintenance records, private channels, secret deals, broken agreements, lies told in darkness by people who believed nobody was listening. All of it time-stamped, all of it verified, all of it organized by faction and date. Ilara watched the transmission progress indicator climb toward completion. "No more secrets," she said quietly. "No more deals made in darkness." The data dump took 6 minutes to transmit. 6 minutes to distribute 7 months of gathered intelligence to every corner of the sector. When it finished, Ilara allowed herself a small breath. Now they would have a very honest conversation. Ambassador Thavin downloaded the data packet and expected military intelligence, fleet positions, patrol routes, strategic analysis. What Thavin found was so much more. The Thavin section contained private communications between council members and Velcarth intermediaries, supply agreements that had been voted against in public session but honored in secret, trade deals that violated Confederation law but served individual interests. 3 separate instances of Thavin naval vessels entering Dravathi-flagged zones without declaration, each one logged with exact timestamps, vessel identification, and precise heading coordinates. Thavin scrolled through the records with growing horror. One incident in particular made Thavin's hands shake. A meeting 6 weeks ago, 4 people, no official record. A decision to authorize a reconnaissance mission into disputed territory. Thavin had personally approved that mission. In a room with 3 other council members, they had agreed to keep no records, to maintain plausible deniability. The humans had records. They did not have audio from the room, but they had the vessel movement that followed 90 minutes later. They had the encrypted message sent immediately after the meeting. They had the reply. They had the complete operational timeline. For anyone who knew what they were reading, the story was perfectly clear. Thavin closed the Thavin section and opened the Dravathi files. Worse. So much worse. Fleet Commander Drex's private communications with Admiral Thavin, requests to delay supply agreements, plans to move weapons depots without informing other factions. 3 cases of falsified sensor logs to justify territorial claims. One message detailed a firing incident on a civilian freighter. The official report called it a navigation error. The private channel revealed it was deliberate intimidation. Thavin felt sick. The Velcarth section was almost predictable in its cynicism. Chancellor Thyros playing both sides, sending private assurances to Dravathi contacts while publicly supporting Thavin neutrality. One message stood out for its casual brutality. "Let them fight. We will sell to whoever is left standing." Thavin sat back and stared at the ceiling of the council chamber. Hour 1, anger at being spied upon. Hour 2, fear at the scope of exposure. Hour 3, something approaching respect. The humans had not just observed military movements. They had collected a complete record of political corruption, broken promises, and diplomatic lies across 3 civilizations. And they had just made it all public. Thavin thought about what happened next. The political fallout, the recriminations, the investigations. Then Thavin thought about the humans. About a species that had sent 1 ship into hostile space and waited 7 months for exactly this moment. About a captain who understood that preventing war required exposing the lies that made war possible. Thavin opened a new message to the human diplomatic office, drafted 3 paragraphs, deleted them, drafted again, too aggressive, deleted, too deferential, deleted. What Thavin felt was complicated. Anger and fear and respect, all mixed together in a way that was difficult to articulate. Finally, Thavin wrote 1 sentence. "We should have been speaking to you sooner." Sent it before reconsideration was possible. On the Dravathi flagship, Fleet Commander Drex Van read the data packet and felt his career collapsing in real time. Every private communication, every back-channel deal, every order that skirted the edge of military law, exposed, public, distributed to every faction and every neutral observer in the sector. Drex's first instinct was denial. Attack the messenger, destroy the credibility of the source. He opened a channel. All frequencies. public broadcast. His voice carried the weight of official authority, the tone of a man who would not be questioned. This data is fabricated, a deliberate falsification designed to sow discord among allied forces. The Dravathi Empire does not recognize the legitimacy of these so-called records and considers their distribution an act of information warfare. He used the specific Dravathi legal term for falsified records, a term that carried weight in military tribunal proceedings. It was a bold move. It would have been an effective move if he had made it before the data was distributed to every independent trade council and neutral relay buoy in the sector. He made it after. On the Constellation, Silas Dane heard the transmission and looked at Captain Voss with an expression that was almost sympathetic. "He really went with fabricated," Silas said. "He is running out of options," Zara observed from her station. Ilara opened a response channel. Her voice remained calm, even. No rise in tone, no emotion, just facts. Fleet Commander Drex Van, at the 15th hour on day 104 of our observation, you transmitted a private message to Admiral Thavin using the secondary encrypted band your fleet reserves for direct command communication. The content of that message was a request to delay the Velcarth supply agreement by 3 weeks in order to move a weapons depot without Thavin knowledge. I will now play that message in full. Ilara nodded to Silas. The recording played on every open channel in the sector. Drex Van's own voice, flat, clipped, unmistakably his. The exact words, the exact request, the exact timestamp. The channel went silent, stayed silent. On the Dravathi flagship, Ensign Kale Vex sat at his sensor station and realized he had been holding his breath. He let it out slowly. He had listened to Fleet Commander Drex call the data fabricated. He had almost believed it. Almost. Because believing it was easier than accepting the alternative. The alternative was that a human vessel had been sitting in their space for 7 months, hearing everything they said, recording every order, documenting every lie. Kale believed the alternative now. He watched Senior Officer Draven standing next to Commander Drex, watched Drex's face as his own voice played back to him, watched authority shatter in real time. Draven spoke quietly. "Sir, I recommend we listen to what she has to say." Drex said nothing, just nodded once. He looked smaller than he had 3 minutes ago. Ilara waited 30 seconds. Let the silence extend. Let the implications settle. Then she opened a wider channel, one that pulled in all 3 factions simultaneously. "We are not here to prosecute anyone. We are not here to claim the corridor or take sides in your dispute. What we are here to do is prevent a war that none of you can afford and all of you are about to start anyway." She pulled up the corridor map on her screen. Nobody else could see it, but she had memorized every detail. The Araven Corridor is a transit lane. It has been a transit lane for 300 years. In that time, it has changed hands 14 times. Every time it changed hands, the surrounding sector paid for it in ships and lives and broken economies. Pause. Let the history land. We have been watching you build toward number 15. We would like to suggest that you do not. The response came from Ambassador Theron, voice careful, measured. "And if we decline your suggestion, then we leave," Ilara said. "We go home, we write a very detailed report, and in approximately 2 years, when the war you started here has spread to 6 other systems, and you need someone to broker a ceasefire, you contact us again, and we will send another ship." A different kind of silence. Not shock. Calculation. "You would simply leave?" Theron asked. "We are not here to save you from yourselves," Ilara said. "We are here because it is cheaper to stop a fire early. If you prefer to let it burn, that is a choice we will respect." Silas Dane looked at Zara and whispered, "She just told 3 alien factions we did their economics homework while hiding in their backyard." Zara's expression was close to a smile. "They needed someone to..." Elara continued. "The 3 economic zones connected by this corridor have lost a combined 14% of their trade volume over the past 30 years due to rerouting costs and conflict delays. An open corridor under joint management recovers that loss within a decade. We did the math. We have been here a long time. We had time to do a lot of math." She paused. "Let the numbers sink in. We want the corridor to stay open, not Dravathi controlled, not Thavin administered, not Velcarth taxed. Open, neutral, managed by a joint council with rotating oversight so no one faction can close it for political reasons." Fleet Commander Drex spoke for the first time since his authority had been destroyed. His voice had changed, not performing confidence anymore, actually thinking. Which body would adjudicate disputes? "An independent trade council," Elara said immediately. "The Araven Merchant Assembly has been operational for 60 years and has a clean record on dispute resolution. They already manage 3 neutral waypoints in this sector. Adding the corridor to their mandate requires a simple expansion of charter." "That council," Drex said, slowly checking something, "is 62% human registered merchants." 47%, Elara corrected. "That figure was accurate 18 months ago. We have updated numbers." Silence. "Of course you do," Drex said. It was not angry. It was something closer to exhausted respect. Chancellor Thyros had been silent throughout the exchange, listening, calculating, looking for advantage. His belief system was built on the principle of leverage, the swing vote, the party that had not committed. Everyone needed to convince him. That was power. He decided to remind everyone that Velcarth still mattered. Thyros sent a private order to his fleet commander. Move 2 ships to flanking positions around the human vessel, not to engage, just to demonstrate presence, to show that Velcarth had military capability and political relevance. The ships began moving. On the Constellation, Elara saw the movement on her sensors immediately. She opened a channel, did not wait, did not ask for explanation. "I see the Velcarth vessels moving to bearing 92 and 114. I want to be clear that we do not consider that a hostile act." Pause. "I also want to note that we have detailed maintenance records for both of those ships, and I know one of them has a coolant issue in its secondary drive that would make a high-burn maneuver inadvisable." On his luxury vessel, Chancellor Thyros stared at his screen. He called his aide. "Pull up maintenance records for those 2 ships." The aide pulled the files. The coolant issue was real. Filed internally 11 days ago. Not public information, not shared with other factions. The humans knew anyway. "You have been inside our maintenance records," Thyros said on the open channel. Not a question, a statement. "We have been listening to your internal communications," Elara said. "Maintenance reports are filed on standard broadcast frequency between your engineering teams and your supply depot. We were not specifically looking for them. They were simply there." Thyros thought about what else transmitted on standard broadcast frequency. Daily reports, personnel logs, supply requests, medical updates, routine communications between crew members who had no idea anyone was listening. He thought about what the humans might have collected without even trying. "What do you want?" he asked. He meant it as a political question. What are your terms? What is your price? It came out sounding like genuine inquiry. "We want the corridor to stay open," Elara said. "Not controlled by any single power, not taxed for political gain, not closed when convenient for one faction's interests. Open, neutral, beneficial to everyone." "That is an idealistic proposal," Thyros said. "It is a practical one," Ilara replied. "You have been fighting over this corridor for 30 years. In those 30 years, the economic zones connected by it have lost substantial trade revenue. An open corridor recovers that loss. That is not ideology, that is mathematics." Thyros was quiet for a moment. "Your methods are unexpected," he said finally. "We have been told," Ilara said. "I mean that as something closer to a compliment." "I know. That is why I did not argue." 6 hours into the crisis, Silas Dane was monitoring fleet positions when he noticed something. The 2 Velcarth ships that had moved to flanking positions earlier had not returned to their original formation. They were holding position, uncertain. Then a 3rd vessel began moving, a fast courier-class ship, small, quick, designed for rapid transit. Silas watched its trajectory for 90 seconds, plotted the heading, ran the projection. "Captain," he said quietly. "I see it," Ilara replied. "That courier's heading will take it past the relay buoys on the outer edge. If someone wanted to pull the data copies before they reached the neutral trade councils, that would be the route." Ilara opened a channel immediately. "Chancellor Thyros, please recall your courier." The longest silence of the day. The courier continued moving. Every sensor in the sector tracked it. Everyone waited. Then the courier changed course, began return trajectory, went back. Thyros's voice came through the channel, flat, controlled, something underneath it that sounded like curiosity. "You were watching the courier." "We were watching everything," Ilara said. "That is what we do." Another pause. "You are a very strange species," Thyros said again. "We have been told," Ilara repeated. Silas looked at Zara. "She just stopped them from destroying evidence without firing a shot." "She stopped a war without firing a shot," Zara said. "The courier was easy." But the implications were profound. It was not just that Ilara had seen the courier, it was that she had identified its purpose and intervened before it reached its target. Real-time surveillance, not historical playback. The humans were watching now, actively, constantly. That was the real weapon, not the data they had collected. The fact that they were still watching, still recording, still present. Ensign KL Vex, monitoring from the Dravathi flagship, ran calculations. For the humans to identify the courier's mission before it reached the relay buoys, they had to be monitoring communications at a level that suggested either predictive analysis or direct interception of Thyros's orders. All 3 options were terrifying. Kyle opened a new file and began drafting a transfer request. Not to another Dravathi ship, to somewhere else. Somewhere that valued accuracy over politics. Somewhere that understood mathematics did not lie. 10 hours into the crisis, military advisor Sovan sat in a private conference room with Ambassador Theron and said nothing for 20 minutes. She was thinking. Finally, she could not keep the question inside anymore. "Ambassador, how many human vessels are currently cloaked in Thavin's space?" She did not say it dramatically, just genuinely needed to know. Theron looked at her, did not answer, not because of secrecy, because of ignorance. Theron did not know. That was the answer. Both of them understood it at the same moment. Neither spoke for a while. The question began spreading through fleet channels and council back channels. Different languages, different phrasing, same tight feeling behind it. How many more are there? Could be 0, could be dozens, no way to tell. The Constellation had sat 11,000 kilometers away for 211 days. Nobody had known. What else was out there? Who else was watching on the Constellation? Ilara intercepted the question spreading through communication networks, heard it in multiple versions, multiple languages. Silas looked at her. They are asking how many more ships. I know, Ilara said. Should we clarify? No. Pause. Let them wonder. 12 hours after the decloak, the galaxy was recalculating. The Dravathi were running emergency reviews of every secure channel they had used in the past year, assuming compromise, assuming human access. The Thavin were calling intelligence briefings, asking questions that had no answers. How long? How many? How much do they know? The Velcarth were conducting communication audits, reviewing every deal, every private arrangement, every secret agreement, wondering what else the humans had heard. And in 300 separate locations across 6 star systems, military officers and political leaders were looking at star maps and asking the same question. Where else are they watching? The ISV Constellation had changed more than the immediate crisis in the Araven Corridor. It had changed the fundamental assumption of galactic politics, the assumption that you could act in secret, that you could make deals in darkness, that you could lie to your rivals and your allies and nobody would ever know. That assumption was gone. The void between stars was not empty. It never had been. And now everyone knew it. Captain Ara Voss stood on the bridge of her ship and watched 3 fleets holding position, waiting, calculating, understanding that the old rules no longer applied. She had been patient for 211 days. Now she would be patient a little longer. The ceasefire would come, not because she demanded it, because the mathematics left no other choice. War had become too expensive. Peace had become too cheap. The numbers would do the rest. 72 hours after Captain Ara Voss spoke 4 words that changed the galaxy, the ceasefire was not signed. It was agreed to. The difference mattered. A signed document would have meant lawyers and formal sessions and the kind of ceremony that gave everyone involved a chance to perform victory for their constituents. What happened instead was quieter, more durable. Fleet Commander Drex Van held position, did not advance, did not claim territory, simply stopped moving forward and waited. Chancellor Thyros withdrew the courier vessel and the 2 ships that had attempted to flank the constellation. No public announcement. Just quiet repositioning that appeared on every sensor array in the sector. The Thavin Confederation Council voted in closed session, not unanimous, but enough. 47 members supporting the Joint Corridor Management proposal, 31 opposed, 12 abstaining. Enough. Ambassador Theron Kale sat in the council chamber after the vote and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Thought about that word. Enough. Not perfect. Not everything anyone had wanted. Just enough to stop the situation from getting worse. Enough to give the slower, better process a chance to work. Humanity, Theron realized, had a very precise understanding of enough. They did not want total victory, did not want humiliation of their opponents, did not want to impose their will through force. They wanted an outcome, a practical solution that served everyone's interests better than war would. Theron had spent 40 years in politics and rarely encountered that kind of pragmatism. The joint management proposal was simple in its construction. The Araven Merchant Assembly would expand its charter to include corridor oversight, a joint council with rotating membership from all 3 factions, each faction receiving equal representation. Decisions requiring approval from at least 2 factions to prevent unilateral action. Timeline: charter expansion within 30 days before political will faded and old grievances resurfaced. Fleet Commander Drex sent a private message to both Theron and Thyros. The content was brief. The human is correct. We proceed with joint management. Not gracious, not enthusiastic, but acceptance. Chancellor Thyros issued a public statement an hour later. The Velcarth Collective supports the joint management proposal and looks forward to productive economic cooperation that benefits all parties. Translation. We did not get the monopoly we wanted, but an open corridor is still profitable. Ambassador Thavin made the final announcement. The Thavin Confederation formally endorses the Araven Joint Management Initiative. We believe this represents the best path forward for all parties and for the long-term stability of the sector. Translation. We are profoundly relieved we do not have to fight a war we could not afford. On the bridge of the Constellation, Captain Ara Voss listened to the three statements and allowed herself one small breath. Good, she said. We will transmit formal proposal documents within 6 hours. Captain Voss out. No celebration, no speech, no congratulations from her crew. Mission accomplished, time to move to the next task. Elara filed her mission report from the same chair she had occupied for 211 days. The report was 3 paragraphs. An ISV classification officer reviewing it 6 months later would note that it was the most information-dense 3-paragraph report in recent operational history. Captain Voss had a remarkable ability to say exactly what happened without using a single word that was not necessary. Paragraph 1. The observation period, 211 days. 94 terabytes of data collected. 3 factions and their positions. Assessment war imminent, without intervention. Paragraph 2. The intervention. Decloak on day 200, 11 hour 0. Communications established with all factions. Data distributed to all relevant parties. Ceasefire agreed at hour 72. Joint management proposal accepted in principle by all 3 factions. Paragraph 3. Current status and next steps. Mission successful. Recommend formal contact with Araven Merchant Assembly within 30 days to begin charter expansion discussions before political will fades. Additional observation. Salvari Passage region showing increased tension signals over past 8 weeks. Recommend monitoring. Final line. ISV Constellation ready for reassignment. Elara sent the report. Made herself a cup of water, the ritual that had sustained her for 7 months. She thought about what they had accomplished. Not with weapons, not with threats, with patience and information and the willingness to wait for exactly the right moment. Preventing war is harder than winning one. They had done the hard work. Lieutenant Commander Silas Dane appeared in the doorway. So, he said. Home? Not yet, Elara replied. Silas looked at the ceiling, the same way Ambassador Thavin had looked at the ceiling hours earlier, though neither would ever know they shared that gesture. The other corridor, Silas said. Not a question. Salvari Passage has been running tension signals for 8 weeks. Someone should be watching it. Silas's expression was half complaint and half something that was not quite pride but lived close by. I am going to need more coffee rations this time. Put in the request, Elara said. Silas left. She heard him in the corridor outside telling Dr. Zara Nakamura to plot the route to Salvari Passage. She heard Zara's response. Already have it. Elara was not surprised. 76 hours after the Decloak, Ensign Kale Vex received a response to his transfer request. He had submitted it on day 207, 4 days before the constellation revealed itself. Before he knew for certain that his calculations were correct. Before mathematics proved that commanders could be wrong and sensor officers could be right. The response was brief. Transfer approved, standard processing time. No flags, no questions. Destination Advanced Training Program. Deep Sector Analysis. Long-range signals interpretation. Intelligence division work. Kale packed his belongings quietly. The decision was made. He was certain. No need to perform certainty for anyone. His bunkmate found him sealing his last container. Where are you going? The bunkmate asked. Training program, Kale said. Deep sector analysis. Long-range signals interpretation. That is intelligence division work. I know. Because of the humans. Kale closed the container and looked at his bunkmate.
Because I would rather be the one doing the watching than the one who did not know he was being watched.
He said it without anger, just as fact, something he had accepted and was moving forward from. The after-action records would note that Kale Vex was the only member of the Dravathi fleet to have predicted the constellation's presence before the Decloak. He had been right for partially wrong reasons. His calculations assumed the ship had arrived 6 months prior, not 7. But he had been the one who ran the numbers honestly, who trusted mathematics over authority. That was more than anyone else had done. Kyle walked off the Dravathi flagship without looking back. 6 months later, he would submit an application to the Human Intelligence Bureau's Cultural Exchange Program. The application would be accepted. He would become the first Dravathi citizen to formally work with human intelligence services. His specialty would be detection countermeasures. The irony was not lost on him. The galaxy recalibrated rapidly. On the Dravathi homeworld, Fleet Command filed 2 reports within 72 hours of the ceasefire. The first recommended immediate sensor array upgrades across the entire fleet. New protocols for passive detection. Increased frequency of deep field scans. Operating assumption. Current technology insufficient for detecting human stealth-capable vessels. The second recommended opening formal diplomatic contact with the Human Exploration Bureau, establishing communication channels, cultural exchange programs, intelligence sharing agreements. The addendum to both reports contained a single line that would be quoted in strategy briefings for years. Do not assume you are alone. Do not assume you would know if you were not. The Thavin Confederation called an emergency intelligence review. The question posed to every analyst and strategic officer: how many other corridors might humanity be watching? The answer came back uniform. Unknown. New policy directive. Operate under the assumption of human presence in all contested zones. Conduct diplomacy as though every communication is being monitored. Make decisions as though someone is always watching. Better to assume and be wrong than the alternative. Chancellor Thyros ordered a comprehensive communication audit of all Velcarth channels for the previous 2 years. The purpose was simple. Understand what the humans might have heard. The result was predictable. Assume they heard everything. New protocol. No communication channel to be considered secure unless using quantum encryption. All sensitive negotiations to be conducted under the assumption of foreign intelligence access. On day 215, the Araven Merchant Assembly received formal contact from a human diplomatic representative. Dr. Zara Nakamura, temporarily assigned to diplomatic duties, opened negotiations for charter expansion. The timeline was ambitious. 6 months of negotiation. Full joint management operational within 1 year. The story leaked to Galactic media on day 217. Headlines varied by species and political orientation, but the core narrative was consistent. Human vessel observed 3 factions for 7 months undetected. The ship that prevented a war. How many more human phantoms are watching? The official human response to all inquiries was identical. We do not comment on operational capabilities. The unofficial response, whispered through diplomatic channels and strategic briefings, was more revealing. How many ships enough? At hour 73, the ISV Constellation went dark. No announcement, no ceremony, no final transmission to the 3 fleets that had spent 72 hours adjusting to its presence. One moment it was there on every sensor array in the corridor, a long, narrow shape sitting patient and unhurried in the void. The next moment, it was not. Senior Officer Draven was at his station on the Dravathi flagship when it happened. He had been monitoring the human ship constantly since the decloak, watching it, studying it, trying to understand how it had remained invisible for 7 months. He saw the scan pulse at hour 7300. The constellation was present. He saw the scan pulse at hour 73:15. Empty space. Draven ran an emergency full-spectrum scan. High sensitivity, military-grade sensors, every detection protocol the Dravathi possessed. Returns came back clean. Empty. Nothing. He ran a second scan. Same result. He ran a third scan knowing it was futile, but unable to stop himself. Still nothing. Draven stared at his screen for a long time. At the space that looked exactly the same as it had 212 days ago when the constellation was hiding in it and they had no idea. The stars looked the same. They always did. That was the point. Draven thought about the Salvary passage. Captain Voss had mentioned it in her proposal. Tension building. Someone should watch it. He thought about 3 other contested zones he knew about. Several more he did not. Corridors and choke points and strategic positions across the sector. Quiet, patient ships that might or might not be sitting in all of them right now. Watching, recording, waiting for conversations that had not yet been needed. Draven could not know. That was the weapon. Not knowing, never being certain. The best policy was to assume they were there, to act as though someone was always listening. Draven filed his report recommending sensor upgrades. Then he returned to his station and kept scanning. Not because he expected to find anything, because the habit felt necessary now in a way it had not before. The difference was fundamental. He used to scan to confirm the space was empty. Now he scanned, knowing it might not be. Epistemic humility. The understanding that what you know is always incomplete. The humans had taught him that lesson. He would not forget it. On day 220, the ISV Constellation arrived at the Salvary passage and went dark. Different corridor, different factions, same building tensions, same mission. Day 1 of a new silence. The crew had adapted to the routine now. They knew how to live in whispers, how to move quietly through the ship, how to exist in the discipline of absolute stealth. Coffee rations had been fully restocked, Silas Dane had insisted. Filed a formal request citing mission performance optimization and crew morale maintenance. The request was approved without question. Whoever reviewed it understood that the crew of the Constellation had earned their coffee. Silas sat at his weapons console on day 1 of the new mission humming old blues songs while running targeting diagnostics. Back to the beginning of the cycle. Zara was already memorizing the patrol patterns of 2 new factions circling the Salvary passage. Different ships, different tactical doctrines, same mathematical predictability. Elara made herself a cup of coffee. The first in 60 days. It tasted different than she remembered, richer, more complex. Or maybe she had just forgotten what it was like. She thought about the 211 days at Araven, about the Decloak, about 3 fleets learning that someone had been watching the entire time. She thought about what they had prevented. A war that would have killed millions, destroyed economies, poisoned diplomatic relations for generations. Preventing war was not dramatic. It was quiet, patient, calculated. But it was necessary. Someone had to do the work. Elara reviewed the Salvary situation. 2 factions approaching conflict. Regional powers with historical grievances and current territorial disputes. Timeline estimated at 4 to 6 months before crisis point. The Constellation would be there first, watching, learning, waiting for the right moment. Elara would know when that moment came. the same way she had known at Araven. The mathematics would tell her. At 0800 hours on day 220, Captain Ara Voss gave the order. All systems to stealth configuration. We are ghosts again. The Constellation's reactor dropped to minimal output. Life support shifted to whisper mode. Communication arrays went silent. The ship disappeared into the void. Somewhere two factions continued their dance toward war, unaware that someone was watching, unaware that someone was already planning how to stop them. The void between stars is not empty. It only pretends to be. 7 years later, the document was stamped with Dravathi military classification codes and a declassification date that had expired 7 days ago. It spread through strategic planning offices and intelligence bureaus across 6 star systems. Every fleet commander in the sector read it within a week. The title was simple: Assessment of Human Stealth Capabilities, the Araven Incident. The content was more complex. Standard sensor sweeps are insufficient for detecting human stealth-capable vessels. The ISV Constellation operated undetected in an actively monitored zone for a period in excess of 200 days. Recommend immediate review of passive detection protocols. Recommend immediate review of all contested zones where human presence has not been confirmed. Recommend above all that future assessments of human capability begin from the assumption that whatever you believe you know is incomplete. They have been here longer than you think. They know more than you have given them credit for. Do not assume you are alone. Do not assume you would know if you were not. The record was filed without a named author. Most analysts believed it was written by Senior Officer Thavin. The writing style matched, the tactical thinking aligned. But Thavin never confirmed or denied. The impact was measurable. 7 years after the Araven incident, the corridor was operating under joint management. Trade volume had recovered 11% ahead of projections. 0 major conflicts, 0 territorial disputes that could not be resolved through the Merchant Assembly's arbitration process. The model had been replicated in 3 other corridors. The results were consistent. Open access, neutral oversight, economic benefit for all parties. Humanity's reputation in galactic politics had transformed completely. Before Araven, young species, energetic, interesting, not ready for serious conversations. After Araven, extremely dangerous if you lie to them, extremely valuable if you do not. 7 formal diplomatic channels had opened between human governments and other species. Cultural exchange programs flourished. Technology sharing agreements increased gradually. The question was still asked at strategic planning sessions and intelligence briefings. How many ships? The official human response remained unchanged. Enough. Unofficial estimates ranged from 15 to 30 stealth-capable vessels deployed across contested regions. The actual number was classified at levels that suggested it would remain classified for decades. The policy was consistent. Never confirm. Never deny. Let them wonder. Ensign Kale Vex, now senior analyst. Kale Vex of the Human Intelligence Bureau sat in his office reviewing detection countermeasure protocols and thought about the journey that brought him here. 7 years. From Dravathi sensor officer to human intelligence analyst. From loyal fleet member to cultural liaison between species. He had published a paper 2 years ago. Mathematics of Trust: Why Accuracy Matters More Than Politics. It had been well received in both human and non-human strategic communities. He had married a human analyst he met at a conference. They had a child who carried genetic material from 2 species and citizenship in 2 governments. The child would grow up in a galaxy where that was possible because someone had prevented a war 7 years ago. Kale thought about that sometimes, about the ripple effects of one ship's patience. Captain Ara Voss, now Admiral Ara Voss, commanded the Stealth Operations Division from an office that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The same ocean she had looked at 7 years ago when accepting the Araven mission. Her reputation had grown in ways she found uncomfortable. The woman who prevented 3 wars without firing a shot. 3. Araven was first. Salvari came 2 years later. A third corridor crisis was resolved before most people knew it existed. The missions remained classified. The methods remained secret. But the results were public. Admiral Voss still drank water instead of coffee. The habit had stuck. She found she preferred it now. Her current assignment was strategic oversight, coordinating stealth operations across multiple sectors, making decisions about where to deploy vessels, when to decloak, how to prevent conflicts before they ignited. It was harder work than command, more complex, more consequential. She was good at it. The ISV Constellation remained in active service, current location classified, current mission classified, days in current position unknown. The ship would decloak when the moment was right, when the mathematics aligned, when patience had gathered enough information to prevent war through perfect timing. Somewhere in the void, the constellation sat silent, watching, recording, waiting. The crew lived in whispers, spoke in short sentences, drank water or coffee depending on supply status. They knew what the mission was. Watch, record, do not be seen, do not be heard, wait. They were very good at waiting. The legacy of the Araven incident was measured in wars that did not happen, in conflicts prevented, in diplomatic solutions reached before military solutions became necessary. Pre-Araven galactic politics operated on the principle that might makes right. Military capability determined negotiating position. Force projection established credibility. Post-Araven politics operated differently. Information made right. The ability to prove what was said in private. The knowledge that someone might be watching. Secret deals decreased dramatically. Diplomatic honesty increased. Not because species became more moral, because lying became more expensive. The Phantom Protocol became official doctrine. Identify potential crisis points early. Deploy stealth vessels months or years in advance. Observe without interference. Collect complete intelligence. Decloak at optimal moment. Present data. Force honest negotiation. Establish lasting solution. Recloak and move to next crisis. Effectiveness rate 87% success in preventing or de-escalating conflicts. The galaxy had changed. Not through force, through information, through the simple, terrifying knowledge that the void between stars was not empty. It never had been. On a classified star chart in a secured facility, 23 contested zones were marked with monitoring status indicators. 7 showed the notation, "Unknown contact, possible human presence." The reality could be 0 ships. Could be 23 ships. Could be more. Nobody knew. That was intentional. The weapon was not the ships themselves. The weapon was uncertainty, the knowledge that you might be watched, the understanding that secrets might have witnesses. It changed behavior, changed decisions, changed the calculations that leaders made about war and peace. A Dravathi military analyst reviewing the strategic situation 7 years after Araven wrote a single sentence in a classified assessment. "We now operate in a galaxy where honesty is cheaper than deception. The humans made it so." The void between stars is not empty. It only pretends to be. For 211 days, the ISV Constellation had been pretending along with it. Then it stopped pretending, and the galaxy learned a lesson it would not forget. Somewhere in the dark, patient and silent other ships continued the mission, watching, recording, waiting for the right moment. The stars looked the same, they always did. That was the point.